Good morning, everyone, and
Afternoon,
good
Scott.
afternoon. Sorry, it's 1 o'clock. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to July's webinar. So this month, our theme is 1 year later, lessons from the 2025 standards for RTOs. I'm Scott Templeton, lead compliance consultant and former ASPA auditor, and I'll be your host today. I'm joined once again by Sally Tansley, the founding force behind our business and the head of our consulting team. Brooke is on site today with a client, so she couldn't be with us, but she will be back next month. Good afternoon, Sally. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. It was kind of funny. I was on LinkedIn before and I saw that Phil Bevan says there's 5 professional development events happening at this time, and he thanked organisations who are recording it so he doesn't have to clone himself. So that was pretty funny. Must be popular. 1 o'clock
Yeah,
on a Thursday.
yeah, that's right. PD for days. A very warm welcome to all of our RTO Works members and retainer clients. It's always lovely to have you with us, and we genuinely appreciate the opportunity to work alongside you each month. And a big welcome to everyone else joining us today, to our wider community that we've built. And we're proud to offer these webinars for free each month, to the sector as our way of supporting the industry. So please share the link, tell your friends, send the details to your colleagues and workplace people so we can keep on continually growing this community. Today's session will run for an hour, so around 45 to 50 minutes of discussion with Sally and I, followed by the remaining time for questions before we wrap up. Please feel free to pop up any questions into the chat along the way, and we'll do our best to read those as we go and provide feedback or answers where possible. Just to remember, you'll also receive a recording of the session and a certificate of attendance by email after the webinar. Also, the webinars do get loaded up onto YouTube at a later date, possibly by the end of the week or early next week. So if anyone from the office or that you need to refer them to anything that we've mentioned, they can always check it on YouTube. Okay, so let's get into the webinar. It's now just over 12 months since the 2025 standards have come into effect. So today we want to take stock. What's changed around the ground, what RTOs are finding challenges with, and what you could be and should be doing differently over the next 12 months. So that's what we're unpacking today.
Great, Scott. Thank you. We're just going to start off with a quick poll because we do like to do these polls. So Ben's just going to flick up the poll for you to answer anonymously, and it's basically about how you would describe your RTO's adoption of the 2025 standards. And as you can see, there's 4 answers there. Everyone's quickly attending to those.
Yeah, that's
I'll
fairly
just
even spread so far. That's good.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so we'll just leave that a couple of minutes, not a minute, a few seconds, and we'll see where we are on that. I kind of predicted that most people would be on answer three, and it looks like I'm correct
Yeah,
there.
that's right.
So yeah, people saying they're adapting well and solid systems in most areas with ongoing improvements. Some people still saying it's challenging. Other people saying it's struggling to keep up, and 3% saying they're ahead of the game and looking at advanced practice. So that's great. Thank you so much for that. That's
Yeah.
super,
And
super
you did
useful.
you did predict that, Sally, earlier on. You said I think option three will have the most, and it is interesting because the people attending are obviously the people who care and have genuine intentions to meet the requirements. So the people in here today, wanting to do PD, wanting to be involved in the sector, they're the people doing the right thing. So it's it is interesting, the people that are involved in the sector and showing genuine interest because there are others out there who still are struggling or have no intentions of really, transitioning. I was only looking at an RTO website this week and I saw that all the policies and procedures that hadn't been up, that were on the website available and all the documentation were all written to 2015 standards and nothing had been transitioned over, even though it's 12 months going on. So it just goes to show there's a wide spectrum of RTOs and the way that people operate out there. But like you said, Sally, we're not surprised that option three is the option there. because, the people who have genuine intent to do the right thing, they're the people that are in here participating.
Yes, great. Yeah, so the final result there was 57% for option answer three. Okay, so Ben, you can stop sharing that now if that's still on the screen. Okay then, so let's get back into this webinar and the theme, which is about the lessons learned. Sorry, my notes just flicked up too big there. Um, when I was thinking about, what to speak about at this webinar, I thought, oh, I'll just have a look and see what Ask was saying. And so I did look at their recent 2026 June sector webinar, which includes some insights on the implementation of the standards, and that was pretty interesting. It was interesting to see that ASPA say that the areas providers are doing well on and they're not finding areas of concern in is fall into a few key areas. One of them, student wellbeing, which is outcome standard 2.6, access to student support services, outcome standard 2.3, compliance requirements dash standards under Division 1 information and transparency. That's about RTOs not making guarantees or giving inducements about getting certain outcomes such as employment. And then they also noted that trainers and assessors were all appropriately credentialed in terms of having their TAE. So they're the areas that they say that they're not seeing any issues there. And many of you will know that already, as you perhaps would have been at the webinar. Yeah, so I mean, in terms of those areas, I'm not surprised really. I feel that student support's definitely something that the sector's done well. As the compliance standards are prescriptive, I'm also not surprised there, and I'm glad that trainers and assessors are appropriately credentialed. They have their TAE. So moving into the areas where ASP would say they are seeing real concerns and they align with our insights as well. It's our usual suspects. It's poor quality assessment, poor quality training, continuous improvement processes that don't improve anything, and unsuitable or unqualified trainers and assessors in terms of industry competencies, PD and so on, not the TAE, because as I said, that was an area where they're seeing that people are fine.
Yeah.
So in this webinar, what I want to do is look at a bit closer at these issues, but also discuss some different areas that I'm seeing both within and outside of these specific issues. And of course, as we discuss them, I'd like to give you some practical strategies to deal with them. But Scott, before we discuss this any further, I'd like to ask you, are these issues any different to what we saw under the old standards?
Honestly, no, not really. The names have changed, the language has changed, and we've gone to broader outcome statements, but a lot of the same issues are still turning up. So basically, we've shifted from prescriptive evidence to a set of standards which prompt RTOs to evidence the journey that's resulted in quality student outcomes. So we're looking at what decisions, feedback, and improvements led them to the outcome, which of course is competent students. So these standards are outcomes based, hence the name. What I will say is the shift to outcome focused standards has changed who struggles. So RTOs that were already genuinely focused on quality, so reviewing their own practice, acting on feedback, keeping registers that drive change, have found the transition relatively smooth because that's exactly what the outcome standards are asking for. Whereas RTOs that were relying on having the right template, the right policy on file, ticking a box once a year, and the ones, papering over the cracks, they're the ones that are struggling 12 months in. So my honest answer is the issues themselves haven't changed much at all. What's changed is the standards, is that they're a lot less forgiving of paperwork without practice. So I saw exactly the same pattern with the previous standards when they were introduced. There's always a period where RTOs focused on, they're focused on updating documents to match new wording, where it takes a lot longer for that to actually flow through to, implementation, the day-to-day practice. the RTOs that are ahead of the game right now are generally the ones that treated last year's changes as a genuine chance to actually review the way they operate, rather than just a rewriting exercise where they're updating policies to match words and so forth. So they're actually let's monitor what we're doing. Let's actually give this a thorough review and see if the journey in which we're all traveling meets the outcome that we want, which is quality student outcomes.
Great, Scott. Thank you. I just got a little, sorry, technical note
Yeah.
from a participant who says lots of people receive the tickets, but the link is not opening. So, Ben,
Oh,
I'm not sure if there's anything you can do about that, but I just wanted to let you know if you haven't seen that already. Sorry about that, everyone. All right, great. Thanks, Scott. So let's get into each of those areas then. So the first one I want
mhm.
to look at is assessment. And, it always was the big issue and it still
Yeah.
is, and perhaps it always will be. Um, One thing that, even though as could sort of talk generally about poor quality assessment, one thing that they didn't mention in their presentation, which I feel is still an issue, is the requirement to complete reviews of assessment tools prior to use, what a lot of people call pre-assessment validation.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing is a lot of tick and flick assessment review, someone going through the motions, ticking a box to say the tool's been reviewed without genuinely interrogating whether it meets training package requirements, principles of assessment, rules of evidence, and whether it's actually fit for purpose for the cohort. I've seen AI generated responses in assessment review checklists, and across the same checklists as well. So same sort of comments. Um, I think a few things are really important here. The person completing the review needs to understand assessment tools. They can use AI tools to help them for sure, but they still need to be able to interrogate the results and determine if the assessment does meet requirements and the rules of evidence and principles of assessment. Um, I guess sometimes I see trainers and assessors doing the reviews, and while there may be many trainers and assessors who really do understand assessment tools, obviously the role of a trainer and assessor is to train and conduct assessments. So sometimes they aren't the best person to do those reviews. They may be, but they may not always be.
Yeah.
Um, Using a good checklist is important to do the review, one that asks questions relating to whether the assessment tool meets the requirements of the unit and the principles of assessment rules of evidence, but in a clear way, though, so that the person actually using the checklist can understand the questions. Are the instructions to students clear? Are the instructions to assessor clear? We did do a webinar on assessment review a few months ago. So if you're still feeling that that is an area that you're finding challenging, please go back, watch the webinar, and feel free to reach out to us at any time. Um, but yeah, that's assessment reviews. So definitely an area where I'm seeing people finding challenges. I suppose, though, the biggest emerging issue is AI. And as you know, ASCA's looking closely at this in terms of AI principles. And funnily enough, again, just before this webinar, ASCA published its AI principles. So
Yeah, that's right.
so they're up on the website now, and there's some couple of case studies and that kind of thing. So have a look at that. And also, they've recently flagged that they'll be looking at this specifically in terms of assessments generated by AI. Um, and, I'm definitely seeing a lot of that. Something that I really wanted to say on AI use is that AI use needs to be driven from the top down, needs to be woven into policies and procedures and supporting documents. Students need very clear, explicit advice of what's acceptable and what's not. And trainers also need to be trained to recognize AI generated content and know what to do when they spot it. And this work needs to be ongoing. The extent and the level of the change is massive. I was just at the PI conference in the Gold Coast for a couple of days yesterday and the day before. That's a conference that's focused on mostly focused on international education, mostly higher education. But yeah, a lot of the sessions were incorporated things to do with AI use, both, the amazing things it can do as a tool, but also the impact on an area like assessment. And I suppose it got me thinking again that underneath it, one of the biggest issues is the actual assessment tools themselves and reform, the reform needed. So I guess this isn't about lessons from the revised standards, but it is an emerging big, massive issue. It's probably the biggest issue in my opinion. And when I was at the conference, there was one speaker that talked about he was working with a university, and they had a subject on cultural awareness, and they were finding that students were quite disengaged. They all had to write an essay on cultural awareness, and of course, you can just put that into some LLM and generate an essay in seconds. And so they worked with the speaker to do an assessment that was both engaging and also really required the students to do it themselves. So what they ended up doing is they were required to develop a graphic novel that included their cultural values and how they see others, and he showed some of those. It was awesome. I mean, I'm always envious of universities because they get to write their unit outlines and all of that. They don't have to stick to our vet framework. Yeah, I was also mentioning that to Brooke as well, and she's doing an adult education degree, and she said that they've just done an assessment on First Nations people, and they're actually allowed to use AI to research and gather information, but the assessment was around their own personal reflections. What do you know about the topic? Where did you learn, and how has your understanding changed? We've got a long way to go in vet, I think, to change assessments. And on one of the problems, I think, is because the training packages, are very slow to change. So
Yeah, they are.
we're,
Yeah.
we're sort of waiting for that. So I've got another quick poll here, Ben, and that's about what do you think about changing the way we do assessment in vet due to AI? And there's some four answers. There we go. And it looks like there's a lot of people coming in now. So it seemed like there were some technical issues. Really sorry about that. Just when you get the webinar, just wind back. When you get the recording, just wind back. So yeah, really sorry about that. All right then. So what do you think about changing the way we do assessment in vet due to AI? So yeah,
Okay,
uh,
so it's important we can work through it gradually as part of our normal review cycle. Yep, that's getting the most.
that's
That's
good.
cool.
I'm
Yeah,
glad.
interesting.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, large percentage of people think it's important, and we can work through it gradually as part of our normal review cycle. That's great. Lovely. Thank you. Just while we're waiting for those
Yeah.
polls to finally come in, something that really struck me from that PI conference that I went to was a presentation where the presenter put up a slide and said that the future ready graduate is deeply human. The more powerful the technology becomes, the more valuable human capability becomes alongside it. And I thought that was an awesome statement. And I feel it also they talked also about key skills that we need to work alongside AI, and we all need these, and they're all soft skills: strong communication, adaptability, judgment, collaboration, ethics, and critical thinking. And these are the skills that we need to develop, staff, students, everybody. So that's super important. Yeah, and that's my last thought on that. And yes, it looks like the poll, we've arrived at 64% feel that it's important, but they can work through it gradually. That's really great.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I really agree with that statement as well. Because using, AI is a tool, and so using that will allow the person to provide high quality and more efficient work. So, it's a great statement. So I certainly agree with that one as well. It's really good. Okay.
If the poll hasn't gone down, Ben, can you put it? I can't see it anymore, but yeah, if you can remove that, that would be great.
Okay, so I'll move on and continue. So I think that's such an important area, and I think, we'll be talking about it for years to come. Assessment has always been an issue, and now we're just facing different issues. I want to move on now to poor quality training, which ASQA has also flagged as a real ongoing concern in their recent webinar. So some areas they mentioned were training not reflecting current industry practice, structure and pace not being suitable, training product requirements not being met, and training not being suitable for the actual intended cohort. Please put some areas that you think are issues in poor quality training in the chat if you want, and then we can discuss that as we go or even at the end there, and we can include that as a bit of a, I guess you could say, a roundtable discussion. Um, just picking up on a couple of these areas, let's look at course duration, which links Asqua's point about the structure and pace not being suitable. I found it interesting that Asqua is still referring to the volume as learning as a measure of what's seen as training delivered in too short of a time frame. It's a little bit frustrating. Because we're under the new standards and these old concepts are still being spoken about. So I see volume and learning as a little bit of an outdated concept at this point. We're living in an era with flexible and blended delivery, recognition of prior learning, and genuinely individualized pathways. A generic expected duration is a poor proxy for whether real learning has actually occurred. The outcome standards are meant to be more about whether the graduate has the skills and the knowledge, not about how many notional hours they've got logged against each unit. But ASQA is still talking about it, so providers will need to be ready to justify their delivery timeframes against it if asked. So that's just my opinion, but obviously, I would certainly have something there to justify the duration that you have. Um,
Andrew
hmm.
Baker agrees with that. He sent a thumbs up. Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, it's just with the blended learning, and then also it's very common to deliver in clusters as well. I just think having, the set cookie cutter model of, this unit here takes this hours, this unit here, and then going on, especially in the competitive nature as well, where, students, they might choose another course if they can do it
That's it.
in a shorter duration. But one practical strategy to demonstrate that your delivery isn't too short is a genuinely detailed session plan. So you need to evidence how you can actually do it. And so one that actually maps out what is being covered, when and how. And, this will clearly show how the training can be covered in that duration. So if you do have the shorter durations, you need to evidence how it actually can happen and, basically how all the information and material is going to be captured and covered in that. So I think training has always been an issue under the old and new standards because people have always been so assessment focused. Really, the training packages should be called the assessment packages, really. I think focusing on whether your training is engaging, meeting industry expectations, and is the actual right duration. That's the most important thing. This can be tested in many ways. So having a learning review process in place, just like you do for assessments, and also industry feedback on training. So whether it's keeping up to date with new trends and bringing that into your training and watching for student results carefully. So to see if the duration allows them to achieve the required results in the required time. If you have students that are not completing, not getting through the course, then the proof is in the pudding. So then you might need a longer duration. If you're finding that students, if it's a self-paced uh, qualification course, and students are finishing a lot quicker, then you might want to look at revising that duration as well. So, feedback from students is very valuable and feedback from trainers as well.
Yeah, we've had a few comments there, Scott, as well. Yes, of course, I wish the volume would go away. I wish people would stop mentioning it. We were looking on the before, weren't we, about when it actually came into place. I thought it was
Yeah.
like the late 90s, but on the web it said like 2010. But anyway, whatever, it's been
Mm,
around for quite a long time.
yeah.
David Garner says, I agree with Scott, auditors looking for something that's easy for them to measure rather than looking at actual practice and outcomes.
Yeah.
It's really good feedback. And there's a few sort of comments about assessment, which we might pick up later. And there's a question here about some suggestions you can provide for engaging learning. We might pick up some of those at the end, Scott. Hey.
Yeah. So the real test really is that the student is competent. So at the end of the
Mm,
day, the student is job ready. They've got the skills, they've got the knowledge, so they've got a quality outcome there. And that is the true justification. And if that can be done in a shorter duration, then so be it. So they
yeah.
shouldn't really be made to, stay in a course for 12 months just to tick a box.
Yes.
The true test is a competent student.
And
Yeah.
yeah, Andrew was saying that the issues come when you have to change delivery modes between states due to the archaic modes required by the state training providers. That's right.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Look, I want to finish off this section about training by remarking on a key difference under the new standards, and it's the lack of reference to the training assessment strategy. That's definitely something that's changed under the new standards. Of course, you don't need one to comply, but I'd also ask you, why wouldn't you have one anyway? So it's basically your roadmap. It's the blueprint, it ties your session plans, your trainer allocation, the assessment schedule all into one coherent picture. It also makes it easier to sit in front of an auditor and actually demonstrate, it's a genuinely coherent, adequate program, even though it's no longer a mandatory named document. I do say though, it you've never really been required to have a strict, strategy, training assessment strategy as like, you definitely need this, this is what you need, but you need to show how the training is going to be delivered, what modes, all of this relevant information. So if you don't have the training assessment strategy, you're going to need a suite of other material which will actually help you evidence how the training is going to be delivered. Otherwise, you're going to really run the risk of inconsistent training. So you'll have each trainer doing it differently. And you do see that out there. So I've certainly seen organizations that don't use a training assessment strategy, and you do end up with the training being worlds apart. So one trainer does it one way, one does it the other way, and it's very inconsistent. So whilst yes, it doesn't say specifically you need a training assessment strategy. And I've had plenty of people say, oh, we don't need a training and assessment strategy under the new standards. It probably is the best way to provide the evidence. So I think,
Yes.
that's in my opinion the best way to go about it. So if you don't have one, you're going to need a suite of documents to show you how things work anyway. And yeah, I do think if you don't have that standard blueprint of the way, the assessment is going to be mapped out, you will find inconsistency along the way.
Yes, and Andrew was saying that in WA you have to have a TAS for the state training provider, and Lisa was saying I thought everything on scope needs to have a TAS to demonstrate how, who, when, etc., and that the most effective way is that. Yes, I mean the old standards didn't. I mean they referred generally to training and assessment strategies, and now that's gone in the new standards. But so you don't have to have a TAS, and ASQA themselves have said that. But yeah. Yeah, David said ASCA auditors are still specifically asking for TAS documents. That'd be
Yeah.
right. Yes, interesting. But yeah, like Scott said, for me, I think the overall thing is regardless of whether they're required or not, I still think, you need some kind of documents that sets out how you're doing things. So yeah.
Yeah.
All right, great. Yeah, and we will come. There's a few questions popping up. I'm so glad that you've all managed to get in, but there's a few questions popping up, and we'll come back to them
Yeah,
at
I'll
the
take note
end.
of some good ones and we'll
Yeah.
definitely visit those at the end as well.
All right, good. All right then. So I'm going on now to the next area that has was flagged by ASQA and also something that we're seeing ourselves is in relation to trainers and assessors. And I think for me, the biggest issue that I'm seeing coming up now under the new standards is a big emphasis on genuinely proving industry competency, skills, and knowledge. What used to be referred to in the old standards as vocational competency, and I kind of still quite like that term. Um, one issue we're seeing is RTOs being picked up about a lack of detail in trainer matrices about vocational competency. So I've always felt if you hold the unit, then your matrix should state that and you can provide some additional information. But if you don't hold the unit, you need to provide a lot more information. And I'm definitely seeing that coming through that you must provide it so that it's really clear that you do hold those relevant industry competencies, skills, and knowledge.
Would you think to the element level is suffice?
I think so broadly. I mean, I remember once years and years ago, I had a client and the auditor had demanded that it was down to the performance evidence and well, it was required knowledge and required skills at that time. So
Yeah.
it took days and days and days, and there was no, AI or anything to help with anything like that in the past. So, oh dear, someone says they're currently trying to complete matrices for 50 units. I've, I'm with you. She says I'm almost insane, Cheryl. Oh
Yeah,
dear,
because
feel
you don't
for
want to
you.
be completing a training and assessor, profile matrix that's 140 pages long. I think writing, if you don't hold the actual unit,
Yeah.
specific unit, I think just writing into the element how you would cover those elements in a brief statement, in a brief paragraph,
Yes,
would be
exactly.
more than suffice. I don't think you need to be writing hundreds of words and, you know, writing to each specific, performance criteria.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. It really is. And I mean, if you hold an equivalent superseded unit as well, again, if it's an equivalent superseded, that's still really good as well.
Yeah.
Something that I'm seeing is being looked at, something I've probably always looked at myself is alignment between the matrix and the resume and the trainer's work references. That's right, ChatGPT does help with doing your matrix. I agree. Someone's just put that in the chat. Um, I guess it's just important to make sure it's sort of in your own voice. Um, but yeah, so basically to make sure that everything aligns. So I've seen resumes and the matrix with the industry positions is different to what's in the resume.
Yeah.
Um, I've also seen reference letters that basically are just sort of cut and paste of the the units in the qualification. And I think one of the drivers behind is this is there's a misconception that you actually have to be working to demonstrate industry currency, and you don't. You just have to keep up to date somehow, whether that's through webinars, etc., etc. It's kind of quite, you can't always be working. We were chatting about this, weren't we, Scott, earlier?
Yeah, I had someone say to me 2 weeks ago, how many days should their trainers be working in industry a year, and just so they can keep current. And I said, well, they don't need to be, so they don't need to, take a week off from their training and assessment duties to go actually work in industry. There's so many different ways for them to keep current with industry and industry knowledge. So whether it's attending, expos or conferences and things like that. Just staying up to date with what the latest trends are with equipment, the way, what employers are looking for, and just basically staying current in the industry sector. And I think that's what it's about. And we did have a discussion about this earlier, Sally, and you did mention a lot of people think you need to do vet, currency against each unit specifically. So
Mm,
say you've got this unit here, I've got to go do something for that. For this unit here, at the end of the day, if you've got like, 16 units of competency that you're delivering, you're going to be doing PD your whole life. So I think you can do an all-encompassing few activities, have it ongoing, have it continuous, make sure it's relevant. I don't think you need to be that specific where you're doing PD for each specific unit. Because
mm.
at the end of the day, I think that would just be too hard to manage, to be honest. And so that's compliance gone wild, I believe.
There's a question here about industry currency for hospitality trainers because, of course, the units talk about that you've got to have 3 years of experience. So the way that that's written, it's not clear how long ago that was, but
Hmm.
it seems to indicate to me when I read that it's 3 years at some point before you start teaching. But whether that's then going forward and needing to work, I'm not convinced that that's enough. And the other money says, so do you have to work in the industry even as a volunteer? No, it's not my opinion that you do. It's also about definitely about the industry that you're in as well. So I mean, maybe if you're an IT teacher, you don't have to work, but it can be useful to somehow go back into industry. Alex says he writes newsletters for LinkedIn based around the units. So I teach. Awesome. That's really good. Lee says she has 52 units on her scope. So it's, yeah, unlikely that she could do three PD for every single
Yeah.
one.
You might have to take a year off.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Um, but yes, Samantha's saying if you can talk to an auditor and tell them what you bring to the training sessions and explain how you incorporate current practice in industry, that will satisfy the auditor. Yeah, I definitely think that's
Yeah.
a good approach. Whether it does satisfy the auditor or not depends who they are, I guess. One thing that we have used, which I think is good, is we have an industry currency verification form. So if the trainer is actually working in industry, it's a good idea to use a form like that where you actually call the person up or email them and get them to confirm what the trainer and assessor is doing at work. So I think that that's better than getting a reference letter, and it's also a good verification process. Yeah, and just one last issue here in terms of trainers and assessors. Something that I think is very important is verifying qualifications. Again, seeing this come up a lot more recently, making sure that verifying their qualifications is through verifying their USI. If that the USI doesn't have all the information, contacting the issuing RTO, and also just checking ASQA's website regularly about whether the qualification or the RTO has been cancelled. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And more and more these days, almost each month, you can see a college being cancelled and qualifications being revoked. So checking regularly, I don't mean like, every day, but I'd say every couple of months checking and just seeing just in case you ensure that everyone that is on staff, their qualifications haven't been cancelled. I have seen a situation where a trainer didn't even realize that their qualification had been cancelled. And I did notify that, found it on the website, ask a website, and let them know. So yeah, it does happen. So just ensure that you're currently keeping up to date with that. Have a look at the ASPA website. Also, a final point there is staff PD generally. So I've seen a lot of evidence of general staff PD, and of course it's important to do just like trainers and assessors staff. They should have a PD plan which is specific to them. So if it's support staff, things like you could say communication skills, student support strategies, understanding how to complete student support plans. And just, the PD should be logged, of course. So, what the summary of the outcomes were, when was it conducted? And that way, everyone's informed of what they're doing. And that way, as well, everyone in the organization has buy-in to the compliance. I think that's a real important thing. So, compliance isn't just left to the compliance manager or just the compliance team and everything's their fault. Everyone in the organization needs to play their part. So everyone has buy-in. So support staff, admin, the C-suite, everyone's got buy-in or everyone works together. So I think that's the best way going forward. And that's proper governance. That is.
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
Okay, I'd like to look into the final area that we're seeing coming up as an issue and where ASQA has determined as an area of concern, and that is poor quality continuous improvement. So this could be inadequate systems, inadequate monitoring of third parties, inadequate, evidence of continuous improvement actions, not using the feedback. So this really drives home that cookie cutter style of compliance where in which a piece of evidence is like a register on its own, it doesn't suffice. So it's not what the outcome standards are about. It's, as it says, outcomes based. So it's how you use the feedback, how your practices improve from identified risks. How have you captured the information to inform better quality training and assessment? So it's the journey to a quality student outcome. That is your actual evidence. So the journey in which you go on to get to that end goal of a competent student that's graduating with, a high level of skills and knowledge and they're job ready. For me, that is your marker for compliance. So however you get there, that's up to the
Yes.
RTO itself. But that journey along the way, that's how you evidence compliance, just to ensure you're getting to a quality student outcome as your end goal. They're called outcome standards for a reason. And
No, thank you.
that's, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
that's right. So that's the genuine marker for compliance, that.
Great. Thanks. Thank you, Scott. That's great. Just one sort of issue arising that I'm seeing very recently with the new standards that I wanted to talk about before we do a summary and wrap up before questions is in relation to conflict of interest. I've never seen that come up as an audit issue. It came up when I was assisting a client at an audit and later found out that it had come up in another audit. It happened to be the same auditor, but so that might be just because that's that particular auditor's focus, and we all know that auditors do have certain focuses. But what the issue was is that for the RTO that I was assisting, there was one person that was working across two RTOs, which is, common, and especially in these tough times as well. And the auditor wanted to know specifically how the conflict of interest was being managed and wasn't satisfied that this was being managed through, general means like code of conduct, staffing policy, and general professionalism. They appeared to want an actual conflict of interest declaration that identified how the conflict would be addressed, information entered on a register, and evidence of ongoing management. And it also got me to think about that conflict of interest then that would be very relevant with trainers and assessors who are working across multiple RTOs.
No, it's very common to
Yeah,
see trainers
yeah,
working, two RTOs more, because a lot of trainers out there, they're contracted. So, they might do a few hours a week with one RTO and then with another.
exactly.
So yeah, gee, that's,
Something to look at, I
yeah,
think.
absolutely.
Because that is real. So yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, thanks for that, Sally. Look, I'd like to finish on providing an overall view on the 2025 standards for RTOs. And also note as well, we're all saying 2025 standards for RTOs now. The revised standards has disappeared. So we've transitioned. It's a year on. We're calling it by the correct name. So prescription, being told exactly one way to do something is no longer really in place under the outcome standards. So don't let a consultant or anyone else tell you it absolutely has to be done using one specific template or process. Go to the example that you have about conflict of interest. Although the areas we gave you about a declaration or a register are one way of managing conflicts, it's not the only way. So the important thing is that you can show the conflict has been identified, assessed, and is being actively managed and monitored, and not that you've just filled out a particular form and that's it. But as that audit shows, we manage it informally. That's not going to be enough on its own anymore. So you need to be able to point to something. Pulling all that together, 12 months in, the real lessons are, I'd say there's four. First, move from having documents to demonstrating practice. So the policy on file has never been enough, and it's even less than enough now. Second, get ahead of AI. So get onto it now. Ensure you've got the policies in place. Ensure you're educating staff on the best ways to use it. Don't do it in 6 months' time. It needs governance, clear student guidance, and trainer capability, and it needs to be done today. Third, I'd say trainer currency and authenticity remain an area of concern. Do not cut corners verifying it. And fourth, keep an eye on emerging areas like conflict of interest, because just because something hasn't come up in your last audit or you've had an activity and something wasn't, seen as a non-compliance or, you got the okay, it doesn't mean it won't come up in another activity. You need to be able to justify how you're doing something and how you're getting from where you begin to that final product, which is the competent student. So you need to be able to show the whole story of the journey. Okay. Well, look, that's time. So it's been a great discussion. I can't believe it's gone so quick. We've got a time to read through a few of those questions now and have a look through. So I'm just going to go in and have a look at some of those questions now, and then we'll have a bit of a chat about that. So, oh wow, I've got so
What
many.
about
That's great.
I'm going to the top of the list.
Yeah. Okay.
Scott, what are some suggestions you can provide for engaging learning? I'll just answer that quickly and then maybe you can answer, Scott.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I suppose engaging learning will always depend on the cohort, won't it? Some people prefer online, some people prefer e-learning, some people provide face-to-face. I suppose really though, just a generic theme for me would be that engaging learning would be, for me personally, I would find it interactive, some kind of interactive learning would work well for me. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, I think interactive learning definitely always is a way to keep students engaged. Yeah, just, using different methods of assessment as well. Um, yeah, look, interactive learning, big one, I think, definitely.
And
Keep it
maybe
exciting.
also that whole idea of the flip learning where you do the theory sort of in your own time that is a little bit boring and
Yeah.
more practical sort of in a sort of face to screen setting.
Yeah, that's right. Also, Ranveer has industry consultation can justify the duration. So yeah, most definitely. So feedback you get from industry, if they're the people who are employing graduates. So if they
Yes.
feel as though students don't have the knowledge and skills to be completing these roles, they might say, look, I think you need to spend more time, with practical assessment, doing things longer, or if they think it can be done shorter. I think asking industry about durations is definitely an important thing to do,
Yes.
especially when developing a training assessment strategy. Yeah.
There's a question on, or just a statement just below that about misuse of AI and conducting in-class paper-based assessments or using assessment with restricted digital access. I kind of get that, but then I kind of also feel that perhaps that's not reflective of how we work in a real world. So I get why that's done. It's a good idea, but perhaps that doesn't reflect. And that's, I think, what we need to move towards is that we do assessments in the way that we work in the real world.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, Cheryl says I have an issue with the need for originality and high similarity scores when students are populating templates from case studies. The answers have to be the same. Yeah, it's tricky, all of that. I was helping a client with some validation and I put a chunk of the text from the assessment into Claude and said, do you think this has been generated? And, it gave me, well, these are the reasons why it may have been generated, and these are the reasons why it may not have been generated. Perhaps at the end of the day, then that comes down to the trainer and assessor's knowledge of the student themselves.
Yeah. So Kalpa has said, and this is in reference to the trainer matrix, when you're, mapping the units of competency. What about a superseded non-equivalent unit? Can one only address the gaps in the matrix? So yeah, what I would do is I would provide a statement, brief paragraph about how you would be able to, how you are competent in delivering the gaps in that, whether it's done through previous work, history, or other industry knowledge that you have. So yeah, I would certainly, even though you might hold the unit as it is non-equivalent and a superseded version, I would definitely provide some reasoning behind that to address the gaps, most definitely.
And we just had a little comment about pre-validation and post-validation. Any comments when it is generated by AI systems? I guess, yeah, that's what I was saying before, when you see that it's all just generic and it's not really a sort of a good look into what's happening. I think that's the answer. It's not great. Yeah.
Yeah, so Lee, how much evidence is enough? In my personal opinion, I believe that if you don't hold the equivalent unit, I would provide a paragraph to the element level, describing how you are able to deliver this unit, using knowledge from past work experience, or job roles that you've done, and just which current skills and knowledge that you have, just so you can explain how you understand what the unit's about and how you would be able to deliver that. So I think that's enough. I don't believe you need to go down literally through the entire, all the, I don't think you need to go past the elements, to be honest.
Yeah. Alex says, how do you verify an owner of the business is a builder? What I would do there is I would have a stat deck that the owner themselves says that they're the owner. And also you can provide things like their ABN, if they happen to have a website or some sort of license.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Bava Money says, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Having tons of vet and vocational webinars should be good to prove and also help out for care needs assistance from you outside planning activities, which I do. I think I do enough. That does sound really good. Yeah, if you can do, yeah, some sort of like the planning activities, that's awesome.
Yeah.
David, just a point, just back, we're flicking around a bit, sorry, but
Yeah, no,
we
that's
can't
right.
get through all the questions.
Yeah.
David says ASCA often does not update notices of intent to cancel qualifications on their website. So it's not possible to definitively confirm whether qualification is still valid. In some cases, that's definitely true. Miller says, what are a few things auditors look for when carrying out compliance role? Um, that's a very broad question. Do you mean the actual the things that the compliance manager should have? I'm not quite sure of that question.
So Samantha Judson has, what are the more critical areas to be looked at in audit under student support? So with student support, I would definitely think that it's a journey, the student support. So I would think you would need to capture evidence of how it's identified that the student requires support, the process of the interviews or the discussions that take place, the plan that's put in place. So putting in a plan for, regarding what support they need, and then also having an end outcome. So this was completed, this process. So the process and the whole journey of the student support to be, I guess, have a story to it. So I would ensure that the policy and procedure that you have, that's actually implemented and done the appropriate way. A lot of times, well, not a lot of times, but I've seen many times in the past, student support isn't recorded, isn't documented. It's done very informally. Trainers, can do it on the fly. But in reality, if you've got the policy and procedure there and you're saying that you're doing it a certain way and there's a plan and it's documented in a register, then you need to evidence that you're actually doing that and implementing that. So the way student support would be done correctly is understanding and identifying when the student needs support, whether it's them contacting you or the trainer, identifying that they need support, having the right discussions, having this documented, putting the plan in place, having regular monitors, like so checking in along the way. So monitoring the student support and ensuring that you get to the finish line. So that is closed off and that activity is finalized. So those would be the main things that I believe an auditor would look at. I know if I was auditing an RTO, I would say, can you show me an example where you offered some student support and tell me what what the process was? So how did you actually do this from, first identifying it to closing it off? So just tell me about how you did that process.
Yeah, just a couple of comments, questions. When we ask students to avoid claiming AI as their own, should trainers use AI to give assessment feedback? Well, yes, no, I don't think they should. There's a question here. Can the same LND test be used for multiple qualifications provided they are at the same AQF level? I suppose if the questions are generic, probably, but I suspect best practice there is sort of having different questions for different qualifications because those qualifications differ, but the practical reality is that that's trickier. So I think that that's okay. I'm having a look at if you hold the unit of competency, do you need to continue to show PD for that unit ongoing? Yeah, that's what Scott was talking about. I don't think that you need to show PD for every single unit.
Yeah, and David Garner's got as well, superseded and non-equivalent does not mean less. So that's true. So sometimes the non-equivalence is because the new unit has lesser requirements. So yeah, that's correct. So it's not always the case that there's going to be gaps or there's new content and information. So that's definitely something to look at.
Just a final point, Ewald saying industry currency can be challenging for vet trainers who are working full time. And that's right, that's what we were saying, Ewald. You don't have to be
Yeah.
working, you can do webinars, workshops, reading newsletters, talking to industry people, going to conferences.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, that's right. And I've spoken to RTOs and they've said, oh, it's hard because, a few times a year I lose trainers for a week because, they've got to work in industry. And I said, no, they don't have to go back and work in industry. There's plenty of ways you can evidence industry currency without doing that. So it's just all about whether you're capturing that right evidence and ensuring that you are staying active and up to date with what industry needs, what employers want, and the skills that are required. So that's the main thing. Absolutely. Okay. Well, that's been a fantastic chat. Thank you for everyone and all the questions that have come through. As always, a great discussion. Okay, so just a reminder before we wrap up, you will get a certificate of attendance by email along with a recording of today's session. So for those of you who did miss the start, you will be able to go back and listen to that. I apologize for the error with joining the link there. Also, you can visit on YouTube and have a look at that as well. And any other colleagues that you have, you can send through and they can watch that on YouTube. So fantastic. You can revisit that at any time as well. Look, we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar as always. So if you need any support in this space, please don't hesitate to reach out. And as well, any issues or any concerns you have, please get in touch. If you'd like to know more about any of our compliance retainer packages or consulting services, please reach out to us and also head over to our shop for resources, learning and assessment, and policy and procedure packs. So thank you everyone once again. Bang on 2 o'clock. Fantastic.
Yay.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you all next month and thanks for joining. It's been a great discussion once again.
Thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank
Fantastic.
you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Goodbye all.
Bye.